Your heart stops. 1 second, it's beating the way it always has, quietly, faithfully, in the background, and the next second, it isn't. No warning chime, no dramatic countdown, no voice in your head saying, "This is it." Just silence where emotion used to be. This is second zero. And what happens over next 60 seconds may be one of the strangest things your body will ever do. Because death, at least in its opening moments, may not be the instant blackout we've imagined for centuries. It may be something far more complicated and far more alive. Let's begin with the body. The moment your heart stops, your blood pressure collapses to zero. The 5 liters of blood that were circulating through your body just a second ago stop moving. No pump means no flow. No flow means no oxygen delivery. But here's the eerie part. Your brain doesn't know that right away. For a few seconds, everything still runs on momentum. Your neurons are still firing. Electrical signals are still crossing tiny gaps inside your brain. Whatever thought you were having a moment ago may still be unfolding. If you are afraid, that fear may still be there. If you are calm, that calm may still be there. For a brief instant, you are still, in every meaningful sense, yourself. But that window is closing fast. At around 10 seconds, the system starts to notice the interruption. The brain is the most oxygen-hungry organ in your body. It doesn't tolerate delay. It consumes an enormous share of your oxygen supply, and the moment delivery stops, it begins reacting almost immediately. The cerebral cortex starts to shut down. This is the point where most people lose consciousness. Your eyes stop building a picture of the world. Your ears stop turning vibration into sound. From the outside, it looks as though you are gone, but from the inside, the story may not be over. In fact, this may be the moment when it becomes most mysterious, because in recent years, scientists studying the dying brain have found something they did not expect to find at all. They expected a fading signal, a slow dimming, the biological equivalent of a machine running out of power. Instead, in some cases, they found a surge, not a random flickering, not chaos, a sudden burst of highly organized brain activity, the kind of activity associated with awareness, memory, and conscious experience. Think about that for a second. At the exact moment we assume the mind should be disappearing, there is evidence that it may be briefly become intensely active, as if the brain, instead of shutting the lights off room by room, flips on every switch it still can, as if the final act of a system is not surrender, but escalation. That possibility changes everything, because for decades, people who were revived after clinical death have described experiences that sounded too vivid, too structured, too consistent to dismiss easily. They talk about bright light. They talk about floating above their own bodies. They talk about a peace so deep that ordinary language doesn't seem built to describe it. And over again, they talk about memory. Not memory in the normal sense, not remembering your name or where you parked the car. Something bigger than that. People describe what feels a complete opening of the archive, not just the important moments, not just the milestones, not the curated highlight reel of a life, something much stranger. They say it's the small moments that return, the ordinary ones. A bike ride as a child, a hallway in a house you forgot existed, the way sunlight looked on a random afternoon, a desk, a staircase, a face you haven't thought about in decades. Moments so minor they seem disposable when you live them, and yet somehow they were saved. That's what makes this so unsettling. Your brain may be recording far more than you realize, not just the days you think matter, but the ones you dismiss, not just the milestones, but the Tuesday afternoons, not just the people you loved loudly, but the quiet seconds that passed beneath notice. And if the accounts are to be believed, those moments may come back at the very end with astonishing clarity, not because they were spectacular, but because they were yours. There's a haunting idea hidden inside that. What if almost nothing is truly forgotten? What if memory is less like a filing cabinet and more like a buried city, vast, layered, mostly inaccessible, but still there? And what if a dying brain, in one final chemical and electrical storm, opens doors that normal consciousness keeps shut? Science does not yet have a complete answer, but it also can't fully rule it out. Now, while all of this may be happening in the brain, the rest of the body is entering crisis. At around 30 seconds, oxygen is no longer reaching your tissues in any meaningful way. Your cells begin switching from their normal oxygen-based energy system to an emergency backup. That keeps them alive a little longer, but only at a cost. Acid starts building up. Chemistry begins to turn against you. The body is buying time, but only a little. Your muscles relax. Your jaw may fall open. Your eyelids lose tension. If you are standing, you've already fallen. Your pupils widen and become fixed. From the outside, these are the signs people recognize. The body looks absent, still, empty. But appearance can be misleading here, because one of the most surprising findings in resuscitation research is that some people later report awareness during periods when to everyone around them they seemed completely gone. Not vague dreaming, not disconnected fragments, structured experience, clear thought, clear memory, sometimes even specific sounds or visual impressions. That is one reason the science of dying has become so difficult to reduce to a simple sentence. The body can look finished before the deeper story is finished unfolding. And that gap matters. It matters medically because death is not always instantaneous and irreversible. At around 60 seconds, serious damage is beginning, but this is still a threshold zone. This is still the window where intervention can matter. If CPR begins, if circulation is restored, if defibrillator restarts an effective rhythm, there is still a real chance of reversal. That is why speed matters so much in cardiac arrest. A minute is not long, but in this context, a minute is enormous. Brain cells can survive without oxygen for a few precious minutes before permanent injury becomes likely. That means the first minute is a kind of biological borderland. Not alive in the ordinary sense, not dead in the fully irreversible sense, suspended between two outcomes. A body waiting to see whether blood will move again. Inside that body, early breakdown had already begun. Cell membranes weaken. Enzymes that were safely locked away start to leak. The first hints of self-digestion begin, a process biology calls autolysis. It sounds dramatic, but at this stage it is only beginning. Most cells are still intact. Most structures are still there. The machinery has not yet collapsed. It is still, in a sense, waiting for instructions. And there are only two possibilities. The first is rescue. Oxygen returns. Circulation restarts. The chain of failure is interrupted. Cells recover. Consciousness may return. And someone who was moments away from being gone is suddenly back among the living. This happens every day, which is exactly why those first minutes matter so much. The second possibility is silence. No CPR, no shock, no intervention. No one arrives sometime. And if that happens, then this minute was your final minute in the world, you knew. But even then, the evidence suggests your brain may not spend that minute fading softly into nothing. It may spend that minute doing something far stranger, lighting up one last surge, one last rush of activity across a system that has spent your whole life turning signals into selfhood, one last opening of memory, one last attempt to make sense of everything, one last burst of awareness at the edge of the dark. Maybe that is why so many people who return from the brink come back changed, not impressed by status, not newly obsessed with achievement, but hungry for time, time with the people they love, time inside moments they once rushed through, time to present for the ordinary pieces of life they used to overlook because they didn't seem important enough to keep. And maybe they were wrong. Maybe those were the pieces worth keeping all along. Because in the end, it may not be the trophies that return to you, not the metrics, not the milestones, not the polished version of your life you showed the world. It may be the things that felt too small to matter, a laugh from another room, a staircase in an old building, a white cat, a patch of light on the floor, a familiar voice on an unremarkable afternoon, the kind of moment you barely notice while it was happening, but your brain noticed. Your brain kept it. Your brain stored it somewhere deep, quietly, without asking permission. And at the end, it may hand it back to you, So maybe the final minute is not only about death, maybe it is also about revelation, about discovering, too late and all at once, that your life was never made only of the big moments. It was made of thousands of ordinary ones, each recorded, each carried, each waiting in silence. And if the science is pointing in the right direction, your last minute may not be empty. It may be filled with everything. Everything you saw, everything you felt, everything you forgot, everything that seemed too small to count. Your heart stops, but your brain, for one final moment, may tell the whole story.